There's two. I sent them out. I actually put them in the wrong order that we're going to go to them. One of them's a question from me. And we're going to do the other one first. I sent a question to Matt.
He sent a question to me, and then I'm going to.
Alrighty, gentlemen.
It's future Matt. He sent a question to future Matt.
And you're up.
Hey, hi there.
Here we
I'm
go.
Brant Parsons, Matt Murschel. It is College Football Now, our live show where we talk college football. Our final live show of the season.
It's
Tier. You'll still see plenty of us. We'll have videos throughout the bowl season and everything.
Can't get rid of us that
You're not
easily.
getting rid of us that easily, as far as we know. But we're going to make the picks in the games.
Yeah.
Championship weekend. We'll get to that. But everybody wants to talk about the playoffs. And we'll start with the rankings, college football rankings that came out last night. Nothing overly shocking, but certainly some discussion points. Alabama number 1, Ohio State 2, Clemson 3, Washington 4. So let's just start with that. Do those 4 make sense? Does that make sense? Is that what you expected?
I think it does. I know people have been debating, whether or not Michigan should have been 4, if they should have remained in the, in the rankings, despite the fact they lost to Ohio State, because it was such an epic 2 overtime, type game that they should be there. I know there's discussion about Penn State, Wisconsin, possibly making the jump up there as well. I don't think so. I think at this point, going into the final week, I think those are the 4 teams right now we're talking about. Now, that doesn't mean that when Sunday noon comes out, we're going to see a whole lot of change. I think we'll see possibly one of those teams, and it'll probably be that 4th spot, where it'll really kind of be, it could be anyone's guess by the time it's all said and done.
Rest of the top 10, 5 Michigan, 6 Wisconsin, 7 Penn State. They're all from the same conference. 8 Colorado, 9 Oklahoma, 10 Oklahoma State. We're going to get to a Twitter question that's going to touch on this first, but out of those teams that you're seeing there, if there is a shakeup, Clemson loses to Virginia Tech here in Orlando, Washington loses to Colorado, which of those teams do you think are best poised? You would think Michigan at 5, but they're off this weekend, not playing for the Big Ten title. Which of those?
I think Michigan, to be honest with you. I think that if Washington or Clemson loses one of those 2 teams, I think Michigan's got the best chance. I mean, listen, Penn State obviously lost to Michigan. Wisconsin lost to Michigan as well. So you have 2 schools right there. I think as much as, the Big Ten champion you'd believe would get in, because Michigan isn't playing this weekend, I think there is a big pro-Michigan push by some to get that team in there as well. And listen, imagine having that rematch of Ohio State, Michigan in the playoff, having Alabama, Clemson maybe in the game. I mean, I think there's all sorts of speculation. I've heard some people, say that that's what the committee wants, because this is good television, better ratings. That's not the case. It's not going to happen that way. I think if Michigan gets in, I don't think they get in any higher than 4. I think they would basically slide in. But I still believe this is going to be a year when this is all said and done, that we're going to hear a lot more grumbling from those conferences, like the Pac-12, like the Big 12, who are going to be upset by the fact that they probably won't get their champion in, because the fact that they feel like the 4 teams doesn't work, and they'll talk about expansion. They'll bring that subject up again. Whether or not it happens, whether or not there's movement on it, I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens.
So before we get to our Twitter question, 6 teams or 8 teams? I say 8.
I like 6.
But I know you like 6.
I mean, I like 6. I like 6 with the idea that the top 2 seeds get a bye. And I think that's just kind of an easy way to do it. That way that you don't have to add a bunch more games. I think also it makes being 1 and 2 very special. It makes you have to work harder to try to get to those top 2 spots, because you want to have that extra week open. That's kind of what the FCS does with their playoff. Gives their top ranked teams a bye week going into the second round. So I think that's what I would do if it was me. But again, a lot of people are pushing 8 because they want the idea of having guaranteed spots for all 5 of the Power 5 conferences, and then allow themselves to have a group of 5 spot, and then maybe like a couple of wild cards that can be out there. But I just don't see that. If they do something like that, I think you'd have to almost change the way college football is a little bit. I think you would have to add more scholarships to these teams, because I think the fact that you're adding an extra game or 2, these coaches like Urban Meyer, coaches like Jim Harbaugh, Nick Saban, they all would argue the fact that they need more bodies out there, because right now it's the end of the year, you got guys all banged up. They're using some of these teams are using walk-ons as offensive and defensive linemen at this point.
Yep, but I think you're right. We're going to hear talks.
Oh,
I
it's
mean, we always are.
We always are, but it's coming. It'll
And
start
this
coming.
is going to be one of the main reasons why, and it's a Twitter question from Alan Schmodke. My question for Matt, if Clemson, Washington, Penn State win, can you see the committee penalizing the Buckeyes for not playing and dropping them to 5? And this is the topic that you and I spent a half hour talking when you came in the office. It's what everybody's talking about. Ohio State sitting there at number 2. Now, that quote from Kirby Hocutt says Ohio State and Penn State are not close to each other. If it was a BCS, Ohio State would easily be number 2. But Alabama plays this weekend, Clemson plays this weekend, Washington plays this weekend, and Wisconsin and Penn State play in the Big Ten title game. Penn State has beaten Ohio State. We've talked about this.
We have.
You've sat in with the committee. They've put an onus before on winning a conference, but now Ohio State has possibly the best resume, 4 wins against top 25 teams. You look at this, 3 wins against teams in the top 9, but they could have a loss to the Big Ten champ, Penn State, who has 2 losses. But let's answer Alan's question.
Yeah.
Because it's a good question. Is Ohio State get knocked out if that happens?
I don't know if they get knocked out. I think everyone just assumes right away that because of what you mentioned with their resume, that they're automatically going to be a guaranteed one of those spot in the playoff. I think we've heard a lot of experts talk last night about how it's almost guaranteed that there's no way. Listen, I don't think they get knocked out. I mean, again, this is where you're going to hear all this discussion about expansion because there are going to be people going, why not, But I could see Ohio State dropping. I can see Ohio State dropping to 4. Maybe that's how the committee, I wouldn't say penalizes, but they go to 4 and then you end up having to pay
How the
number
committee
1.
can sleep at night
Yes,
better.
you drop them to 4 and then you move Clemson and Washington. Listen, Washington plays Colorado, which is a top 10 ranked team this weekend. If they beat Colorado and they beat them impressively, it's hard to argue that you couldn't move Colorado or Washington, even though their strength of schedule is the weakest, up a spot. I mean, you could argue that they played a tough and they've gotten to that point. You can move them up a spot. You can argue the spot that Clemson, even though Virginia Tech's not ranked, that Clemson really could move up a spot as well based on their resume. It's going to be tough when you're talking about moving those around. And as much as I know that the selection committee won't look at who's playing who in the sense of like in those games, I mean, listen, you could drop Ohio State, making the case that they didn't play this weekend. Again, you don't have that extra game. I think that's going to hurt them a little bit. But if Ohio State does drop out to 5, then you're going to hear lots of screaming. We talked about some. There's going to be a lot more because there are going to be people who are really question: is it about the 4 best teams, or is it about the 4 most deserving teams that get in there?
Which brings us to our other Twitter question from Brant Parsons.
Is this future Brant Parsons maybe?
When we get up there, it's a question I wanted us to talk about. I have a question for your show, Matt. If it were based on the best teams right now, who would be in the playoff? And because it's my show, I can expand on that beyond 140 characters. So let's throw out records. Mm-hmm. Let's throw out, maybe head-to-head, you don't, but even throw that out. But the 4 teams on the football field playing the best football right now, who would be, if we were just looking at that, who would be in the playoff?
Well, I think you would go Alabama. I think you'd throw Ohio State in there from what they've been able to do. I think you would say Clemson, just from what Clemson's been. I mean, listen, Clemson's loss was a last-second field goal. I mean, they haven't looked great.
They almost had a second loss.
And they almost
on
had
the
a second loss
field goal.
But I'm saying is that, again, that's okay. So you look at that. So I would put Clemson there. I think the 4 spots we're going back and forth, we're arguing about. I think, some people would say maybe Michigan, because maybe Michigan took Ohio State to 2 overtimes, and if it wasn't for a, bad calls, as they would argue, that play, they would have maybe won that game. So you could argue Michigan. You could argue Washington, that Washington, has played really well. Look what they did last week against Washington State in the Apple Cup. They really they destroyed them. Again, you could put them in there as well. We've talked about teams that are in the hot. USC playing really well. Although they have 3 losses, they're playing some of the best football in the country, as is Oklahoma, which is running through. I think if it was me and you said you have to decide, I think I'm going to put Washington at 4. I mean, I just think at this point, the way they're playing, I think they're playing some of the best football.
And my 4 would be Alabama, Oklahoma, USC, and Michigan. That would be my 4 if it was based on the best teams and how they're playing. And I know Ohio State beat Michigan. You could really go either way on that, but Michigan outplayed them for 60-plus minutes in that game. Didn't get the win, but you could make an argument going on the road and coming close. But that's not what the committee picks.
And that's where I think people are get in this heated discussion is, well, it should be these teams because they're playing the best right now.
Right.
Well, that's great, but then why? Then any loss you suffer week 1, 2, or 3 doesn't count. Well, then why play those games as we talked about when it comes to non-conference schedule? Well, I mean, you have to continue to look at the overall body of work. Yes, those teams are playing better. Yes, everything's going on. And they've managed to get those wins late in the season. But again, it's hard to look at USC and go, yes, they're playing great, but they still have 3 losses. And I think that's where this committee is really kind of finding itself this year, especially because you're hearing it more and more being discussed as, is it the best teams or it's the most deserving teams? And I think they'll tell you, obviously, it's the teams that are the most deserving to get in based on their records.
I can tell you, anybody in the playoff not named Alabama would be very scared right now if USC showed up on the other side of their bracket in the playoff.
I think Oklahoma. I mean, we talked a little bit about. I think if Oklahoma got in somehow, they're not going to, and that's unfortunate for the Big 12. But Oklahoma's playing really good football right now. Again, Baker Mayfield is a guy who was kind of an early Heisman consideration, fell out because of those losses, and then now is a guy that you're seeing as a finalist. He's really helped them as well. I think defensively, Oklahoma. That's another reason why they're not in that discussion because they gave up way too many yards and way too many points.
We could talk about this all day.
We could.
And in fact, we do. Just around the corner at our office. It's basically all we've done today. But we have a show here, and there are games this weekend. We're going to rush through them and make our picks. It's championship weekend, championship games in 8 conferences, I believe, out of the 10, and a de facto championship game in the Big 12. I have them in order that they're being played. And that's how we're going to go with this. And we're going to start off with Western Michigan, Ohio in the 20th MAC championship. 3rd title game appearance for the Broncos. They lost in 99 and 2000. Their only MAC title ever came in 88. Ohio 0-3 in MAC title game appearances. They've won 4 titles, but their last MAC title came in 1968. They played last year. Western Michigan won 49-14. I'm taking Western Michigan in this one. I have a feeling that's who you're taking also. But the key for this one is beyond just winning the MAC. Western Michigan playing for a spot in New Year's Day 6 Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, they need to win this game. It's win and you're in. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And I think they will win this game. I mean, listen, you talk about hot names for coaching carousels, for jobs out there. P.J. Fleck, the Western Michigan coach, is obviously one of the hottest names outside of possibly Tom Herman, who already landed at Texas. I think Fleck's name will be mentioned for several jobs. I think the Oregon job, you'll find his name mentioned there. I think you'll also hear maybe the Purdue job and some other jobs that may come open in the next couple of weeks. But he's done a great job with this program. I mean, listen, the MAC is where a lot of these coaching legends have kind of cut their teeth. We talked about Bo Schembechler, guys like that in the MAC. Urban Meyer got his one. Gary Pinkel, Nick Saban. They all got cut their teeth in the MAC. And I think that's what P.J. Fleck has been able to do here with Western Michigan. The best part about it, this story, is he's helped also bring attention to the program. We saw Game Day was there. Yep. And they're also generating enough revenue now that they're making those much-needed facility upgrades, really kind of getting the program where it needs to be. All that alone will help get some attention and gives attention to the Mid-American Conference as well.
Row the boat.
Row the boat.
Pac-12 title game also on Friday night. Colorado facing Washington. Washington has just been on fire this year on offense. They've broken school records for points scored and touchdowns. They lead the FBS in turnover margin. Jake Browning, 3 touchdowns away from tying the Pac-12 season record. He's already thrown 40. You have to think that he's going to reach that in their final 2 games or 3. Colorado has won 10 games this year. Last time they did that, 2001. They've won 6 straight games. First time they've done that since '96. And here's why I'm taking Colorado. Colorado has allowed just 23 offensive touchdowns this season. And just for a comparison of what that number is, last year they gave up 43. In 2012, they gave up 67. The turnaround in Colorado, it's a story that maybe some people have missed. It's starting on that defensive end, and I apologies to you, Dub. I've been slow to back them, and I'm still slow to back them. I think that defense and maybe a little bit of that turnover luck runs out for Washington. Colorado, the most unthinkable Pac-12 champs, the Buffaloes, they got it.
Coach of the Year, Mike McIntyre of Colorado.
Absolutely.
And Broyles Award winner, possibly Jim Leavitt, of all people, former USF coach who is the defensive coordinator at Colorado. Really kind of the spark plug that has helped ignite the defensive effort that Colorado's been able to do. But I'm taking Washington in this game. I just think that Chris Peterson's done a great job so far with this program. You saw it's been a short period of time before they're playing for the Pac-12 championship. Both these two programs haven't played for a conference championship since the early 2000s, and even outright, I think it's longer than that. So, I mean, again, this has been a great story for the Pac-12. I think obviously Washington and Jake Browning will put up some points in this game, even though it's a good defensive effort by Colorado. Again, if you're Michigan, teams like that, you want to see Colorado win this game, but I think Washington is wrapping it up.
A viewer on Facebook Live, Scott Wynn, says Colorado will beat Washington.
There you go. Okay,
So-
it's 2-1. I'm already I'm getting.
And he's got a question there that we're going to answer when we get to
Okay.
the SEC title game. Let's go. We're now on Saturday, 12 o'clock kick, the American Championship. Temple versus Navy. Temple has shut out 3 opponents this season with its defense. They're ranked 3rd in the FBS in yards allowed. They have a good little quarterback running back combination, Phillip Walker, Jahad Thomas, Raquel Armstead as running backs. But Navy comes into this game. They're averaging 41.7 points per game, 342 yards rushing a game. And in November, Navy has averaged 53 points a game, and they have punted twice. 2 times Navy has punted in November. It'll be December by the time they play this game, but I don't see them punting in this one either. Navy is going to run all over Temple. And Navy, Western Michigan is going to be, if they win, be the group of 5. Navy may be the best group of 5 team out there, but because of earlier losses, they're ranked behind Western Michigan. You talk about teams that are playing best right now. That's Navy. Navy beats Temple.
Yeah, I think Navy does beat Temple. I think what's interesting about this game is, let's say Western Michigan, this whole situation with Western Michigan Navy, there's a possibility where the selection committee may have to go another week before determining
That's true.
whether Navy gets into a New Year's Six game if Western Michigan were to lose moving forward, based on the fact that Navy and Army don't play until the following week. So I mean, there's a little bit of some drama there that could take place. Obviously, again, it wouldn't impact the top 4 teams in the playoff, but it could impact where a team like Navy would end up going if Western Michigan were to lose. But I like the job that Navy's done. I mean, you think about this. They joined the American 2 short years ago. 1 year. Last season was their first year. So to be able to get in the conference championship game and to be able to be right there and factor in the playoff, I think that's something that Mike Oresco, the American Athletic Conference Commissioner, has to be proud of, because, again, when you add schools like that and you can add that kind of value to it, I think it's got to be a home run for them.
The Big 12 doesn't have a title game, but for the second straight year, Bedlam will determine the conference champion. Last year, it wasn't on the final weekend. They did it Thanksgiving weekend and had a bye week. This week, it's on the final weekend. Oklahoma State visits Oklahoma. 2 teams in the top 10 in the rankings, and Oklahoma State could have been playing for a playoff spot had they not had a horrible call earlier in the year from Central Michigan in one of their losses. Oklahoma, with losses to Houston and Ohio State on its record, but they have not lost in the Big 12, and including a big win over West Virginia on the road. I'm taking Oklahoma in this game because, well, I put them in my 4 best teams right now, but this is going to be a fun game. This is going to be an offensive game. If you like defense, it could be a very offensive game to you, but there's going to be a lot of points scored. Oklahoma's going to have the ball last and beat Oklahoma State with a touchdown.
Yeah, it's too bad that these 2
Like
teams...
100 to 98.
100 to 90. It's too bad that these 2 teams won't really have any sort of impact in the playoff, because, as we mentioned, both are playing really well right now. Oklahoma, I think, has won 15 straight Big 12 games. They've won 8 so far this season. I think you look at what Oklahoma State's done, they've won like 7 in a row. I mean, again, these are 2 great teams, but because of where they fall in the rankings, they're not going to really make much of an impact when it comes time to the top 4 spots. I think Baker Mayfield, as I mentioned, has played really well the last month or so. In fact, once they've got into the Big 12 schedule, he's looked great. D.D. Westbrook has been outstanding. A guy who was probably being mentioned as an outside candidate for a finalist for the Heisman Trophy. Both those guys are doing great. There is going to be no defense played in this game, believe me. So you're right. It could be a ton of points. So whoever's got the over, take it.
Yes, whatever the over could be. The 25th SEC Championship takes place this weekend, and it's got a pretty common pairing in it. They've met 9 times. 9 of those 25 times, Alabama and Florida have met for the SEC title. They're 4-4 against each other in those 8 previous games. Florida has actually been in the SEC title game 12 times. Alabama has been in 11. Alabama has 26 total SEC titles. They're going for their third straight. Florida has won 9 all time, and Bama is this tells you about the SEC. Bama is the first undefeated team to play in the SEC title game since LSU did it 5 years ago in 2011. That's how dominant Alabama has been. Usually there's a slip up. Even the great Alabama teams have had slip ups. They were able to avoid that this year against Ole Miss. But this game, to me, the question is, are we looking at a repeat performance from Florida last year where they had a great season, embarrassed by Florida State, lose to Alabama, and then get blown out in the bowl? This, again, they win the SEC East, but then they go and the offense is anemic against Florida State, and now they got to play Bama in the SEC title game, setting up for a bowl, possible tough bowl for them. Are we looking at like a thread here for Florida?
Yeah, I think we are. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I think I've said this before. I think this Alabama team is even better than last year's team that went on to win the national championship. I think defensively, this is probably one of the toughest units they'll face. They have the top defense in the country. You know how good Jonathan Allen is, their star defensive tackle. They're able to get pressure on the quarterback. I mean, listen, I would want you want to. There's a part of you that wants to take Florida in this game to say there's going to be a chance. But after watching the last couple games, I mean, this Gators offense really can't put up a bunch of points. I think their defense early on will keep them in this game, much like it was last year. We remember it was a very close game. But I think going into the second half, I think eventually Alabama will wear down Florida and go on to win this game. I mean, listen, it's going to be almost a carbon copy of what happened last year. You hope that when Florida goes off to their bowl game, that maybe it won't be as bad as it was last year.
Now, a couple of things with Alabama is they are beatable. I know everyone says they're not, with strong quarterback play. You don't have that at Florida. Mm-hmm. But also, and they've showed this a couple of times they did against Auburn, the offense is still young. I mean, it's going to be so good when it grows up there at Alabama. They will make mistakes early. They did against Auburn. But if you don't have an offense, you can't take advantage of it, and that's what happened to Auburn. And Alabama turned the ball over in the first half, but if you can't convert that into something in your favor, eventually Alabama, just the strength on defense, the talent at every position, will just wear you down and then end up beating you pretty handily.
Well, the closest team to do that was LSU. And I think what they did, what they did early on, was they got to Jalen Hurts. I mean, Hurts is a true freshman, so he's going to make mistakes. And I think he's not the most accurate passer that Alabama has ever had, but he's got strong leg and a strong arm, so he's able to get away from out of the pocket. So I think the success if Florida wants an opportunity to try to win this game is I think they have to get to Hurts. They have to make him make a mistake, whether it's an interception or a fumble or whatever, and they have to limit big plays, because I think that's what Alabama takes advantage of. Because if you can keep that close and you really maybe get 4, 5, or 6 sacks in the game, I think you might have a chance in this game. But when you look at that defense, I mean, you saw what they did to Leonard Fournette. You saw what they did to LSU's running game. They've stopped pretty much everyone out there who's running the ball. And I think that's Florida right now to a T is running the ball. I think Florida, again, if they want a chance offensively, I think they have to take shots down the field, and they have to hope that maybe they can, get some big play that will maybe put some points on the board.
And I'll say this. Alabama has a better shot to score with their defense than Florida does to score a touchdown with its offense.
Yeah, unfortunately. We saw what happened last year. It took some big plays. But
while we're here, before we get to the final 3 games, we do have a question from Scott Wynn, and he says, will Florida hire Charlie Strong? I'm guessing as an assistant, but I meant to bring up coaches earlier, and the main one is the Oregon job. Mm-hmm. So thanks for the question, Scott. We're going to parlay that into other talk. But Oregon fired their coach after the worst season they had since the early 90s, 4-8. We already know that Charlie Strong is out there. Texas has fired their coach, but they've made a hire. LSU fired their coach, made a hire. So now Oregon is the high-profile job out there. There are people that want to suggest that Scott Frost is ready for it. I don't think so. UCF coach after just 1 year. There have been rumors. Jim McElwain, his name has appeared in rumors out there. But let's talk about the Oregon coaching job and what you kind of see when you look at it.
Well, I mean, again, we know Oregon has facilities. There's never going to be a question about facilities. There's never going to be a question about money. There's never going to be a question. This is a premier, top 10 program that's played for national champions before. I mean, again, it's just finding the right fit. I think, when Chip Kelly left, they obviously wanted to stay within the same coaching vein. They promoted Mark Helfrich and did that. I think now what Oregon may want to do is they may want to go in a different direction. They may want to say, listen, I'm sure Phil Knight, the huge Nike founder and big Oregon benefactor, I think he would love to get a guy like Chip Kelly back, to come in there.
Yeah.
I just don't know if that's going to happen. And I don't know if you look around the college football landscape, I mean, who's out there? I mean, does Jim McElwain make you think that's the right direction? I think whoever they hire, it's got to be someone who's very offensive-minded. We've seen some names being thrown out there. Brian Harsin over at Boise State, Lincoln Riley, the assistant coach at Oklahoma. You see some other names like Dan Mullen's name was mentioned as well. I don't think, and UCF fans can take a big breath of sigh of relief, is I don't think Frost gets a look here. Maybe if it's just a cursory. I don't think it's not because he's not good. I just think it's because he's only got 1 year under his belt at UCF, and I think they want to get someone who's got a little bit more experience to come in there. So again, I think whoever they want somebody to come in and take over right away and really kind of bring some energy back to this program, because you can definitely recruit in Oregon.
Yep.
You can win, and you're playing the Pac-12, which you're going to play some premier games again in the Premier League. So I think they'll find somebody. It's just interesting because whoever takes that job, if it's another head coach, that could just open up some more dominoes down the road for some jobs that'll be open there.
And I'm going to just put out there now, Scott Frost will be coaching in Nebraska 4 or 5 years. That's what I think is going to happen. I think he stays at UCF.
Yeah, I think he stays.
If he continues to have success. I could see him taking over at Nebraska. Mike Riley would be 65, 66
4 or
years
5.
old.
I mean,
I just want to get this down now. I'm saying it, and so
I think
in 5 years
right.
I can say
I think that would be his dream job.
I got something right.
Yes, I think that would be his dream job. I think obviously when we're talking about coaches, again, there's going to be a lot of names mentioned, and I caution people because you're going to see a lot of names mentioned. Well, some of these names being put out there are being put out there by agents.
Yes.
Because they want they want these coaches to get new contract extensions and big raises. So you may hear some names like Jim McElwain and think, oh my, well maybe Jim McElwain gets a big boost after the season's all said and done. So I mean, some of this is not just actual sources. Some of this is done by some of the agents as well.
But to answer your question, Scott, no, Florida won't hire Charlie Strong. Mountain West Championship, do this one quickly. San Diego State at Wyoming on Saturday night. The story in this game is going to be running the ball. Donnell Pumphrey for San Diego State, 4 200-yard games this season. Brian Hill, running back for Wyoming, 2 games of over 200 yards, including the league best total, 289 against Nevada. And just the fact that Wyoming is playing in this game is stunning to me.
Yeah.
And it's going to be high up in the high altitude.
Craig Boyle tells you about what a job he's done as a coach. Guy who won multiple national championships at the FCS level with North Dakota State. He started getting a little bit of that success at Wyoming. It just takes time because again, you're Wyoming and the facilities maybe aren't as up to par as some of the ones across the country, but you have managed to be able to get some winners here.
But I'm going to go sea level and say that San Diego State pulls us off. They've been the better team throughout the year, but just having Wyoming in this game, I think is great.
Yeah, good for San Diego State and Rocky Long because again, back-to-back being in there in the Mount West Championship has been great.
ACC Championship is right here in Orlando on Saturday night. Matt, you'll be at this game. Clemson against Virginia Tech. And Tigers come in this game. They've won 28 of their last 30 games. They're looking to repeat as ACC Championship, looking to get back into the playoff, as we talked quite a bit at first. Of the games this weekend, I would say this is the one that seems the most cut and dry, which, as we've learned this season, means absolutely nothing. But I think that the Clemson fans that travel down to Orlando this weekend will have a much better time than Hokie fans, because I think Clemson's going to win this, and they're going to win it in a way to kind of stamp their destination in the playoff.
Yeah, I think Clemson wins this game. I mean, listen, there's been the speculation to the whole season, what's wrong with the Clemson offense, what's wrong with Deshaun Watson. They haven't looked as dominating as I think as people thought they would look. I mean, I still think this Clemson team is really good. Dabo Swinney said this is his best team so far, which is saying a lot considering you took a team last year all the way to the national championship. I think Deshaun Watson has a big game here as well. I think Virginia Tech has had a nice season. Obviously, Justin Fuente wins ACC Coach of the Year for the job he's been able to do, come in, replacing Frank Beamer, getting them to this championship game. I think maybe they're another year or two off. I think Clemson wins this game, and I think Clemson then secures itself a spot in the college football playoff.
Best part about doing the show live, I just got a message that my 2-year-old took down our whole Christmas tree. Good times.
Christmas is overrated. So
yes, it is. Last game we're going to talk about, the Big Ten Championship, Wisconsin, Penn State. Number 6, Wisconsin. Number 7, Penn State. Wisconsin with a great resume as far as a win over LSU. They played Michigan and Ohio State within a touchdown, took Ohio State to overtime. Penn State comes into this game with the win over Ohio State with losses to Pitt. We didn't even talk about Pitt and Syracuse scoring 500 points on Saturday. But the loss to Pitt and blown away by Michigan. These two teams playing for the Big Ten championship and could be left out, even though the Big Ten could get 2 teams into the playoff. I am going with Penn State in this game because they have developed a belief as the season has gone along. I think after week 4, we even may have mentioned James Franklin's name as being on the hot seat. We apologize. But they have turned their season around, and I think the offensive weapons will be enough to get past Wisconsin. This is going to be a fun game. It's going to be a tight game, but I'm going Nittany Lions, and then you'll have some arguments out there when it comes down to the playoff.
You see, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to take Wisconsin in this game. I'm going with the defense. You know, they've done an amazing job. I thought when Dave Aranda left to take the job at LSU that Wisconsin would suffer a little bit of a letdown, you know, on the defensive side of the football. But Justin Wilcox has come in and has done an amazing job with his team. They are just like they have been in the past. They run the football. They have an effective passing game. This is Big Ten football at its best is Wisconsin. That's why I like them. And plus, you know, I want to see how much the committee looks at this team and says, okay, you know what I mean, do they have enough to finally get into the playoff? I think whoever wins this game, if they want any shot at getting in the playoff, has to win convincingly. Unfortunately, I think they have to score, you know, and have to win by 30 or 40 points. I think they have to make it definitely something that, you know, is outstanding. They can't make it a close game because I think what will happen then is it'll cancel each other out, and I think that opens the door for Michigan to find its way in.
59-0 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, again, it has to be convincing enough that you can make. If it's a 3-point game, a field goal at the end, as much as that's exciting, I don't know if that's enough to get them into the playoff, especially when you're looking at what Michigan's been able to do and what the thoughts on the Michigan are, or when you're looking at what, you know, Ohio State's done.
14, 15 weeks ago, we started this journey, and we've reached the conclusion of our live shows. But you will see us plenty throughout the bowl season, and maybe we'll have a live show pop up later on, but none scheduled. But Matt, I've enjoyed it. Everybody helping us behind the scenes.
Give yourself a hand.
You guys have been wonderful.
And thanks for the questions.
Smattering of applause.
And the
live studio audience.
and the tens of you out there that have watched every show.
Thank you for the questions this year too.
We appreciate it, and enjoy championship weekend. We are done at OrlandoSentinel.com.